Okay, welcome everybody. So today we have Alex William Berryhill from Unreal that is going to give us a quick presentation. Alex graduated from SCAD in 2019. I had actually the pleasure to be Alex's professor in multiple classes. My biggest memory is part of the group that made Doggone Hungry. That made that absolutely gorgeous game, and he was their lead coder on this. And now he's working as a QA person at Unreal, and so he's there at Epic, sorry, and he's there to talk a little bit about Unreal. William, do you want to say a few words about yourself? You mentioned that you like Pokemon a little too much. Why a little too much?
Because I will spend more money than I should on Pokemon stuff. So I don't know if you can see, but right here, this is going to be my Halloween costume this year. I'm going as Litwick with my girlfriend, who's probably going to dress up as a Psyduck.
Nice. And we can barely see it because it's part of your virtual
Yeah,
bag.
yeah, he's kind of just hanging out up here because I don't have a better place for it. Yeah, so a little bit about me and about why we're here today. I've been working at Epic in QA for about a year, and as I've been kind of touching the engine on a day-to-day, I've discovered features that I kind of played with a little bit, and I was like, dang, I really wish I knew this while I was in SCAD. And so that's kind of the point of this talk, is to kind of briefly go over some of the things that I think are really neat. And hopefully you guys can find a way to integrate that into your workflow as you're working with your Studio 1, Studio 2, and maybe Studio 3 stuff. So with that, I think we can just get started. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is something called Take Recorder. And in order to start using Take Recorder, you can use it in any project, but it's not enabled by default. You'll need to go to the plugins window and find Take Recorder. Here it is right here. I've already enabled it to save a little bit of time. You'll enable it, restart the editor, and then you can go to Window, Cinematics, Take Recorder. And now what Take Recorder does is it will record actors that it tells you, or that you tell it to, in real time and save them as a sequence. So to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, we'll go right down here to Source, and we'll say from actor, and we want to record the third person actor. So we'll play in the editor and start recording. And we can do some motions here, run around, jump on some stuff. And then we'll hit escape to stop everything. And we can go, click this button right here to review the last recording, and it opens it up in sequencer over here. And if we back up a little bit so we can see the space, we can hit play, and our actor will come in here, and it's recorded all of the movements that we've done. So if we go back and we do a couple more of these, we'll do some different stuff this time. So we'll just go over here, jump up. That's a good one. And then one more. Whoops. Jump over here. Whoa. Now that we have those three sequences, we will go into cinematics. They're saved automatically in the cinematics folder takes, and we have the three scenes right here. So I'll open one of those up. We should be able to drag, oops. We went to subscenes. Should be able to drag these in here. There we go. Let's see if this works the way I want it to. Okay, so now that we have the two subscenes in there, we have both of these actors moving at the same time, or staggered. So if you kind of layer these around, if you're trying to make like a trailer for your game or something, you can kind of give it a little bit more life. So we can add another one in here, and now we've got like a kind of happy little playroom going on. If you wanted to use one of these subscenes during gameplay, you can Just take it in there, drag it, and set it to autoplay. Now we can just go ahead and hit play, and it'll start playing, but the issue is you have a camera cut automatically saved to the sequencer, which is going to take control, and you can't move the main player around. So we're going to need to do a little bit of editing so that we have control over our main pawn. First, we'll just delete the camera cut, and then we can go into the subsequence and delete the camera boom, and I think that should be it. Yep. Now we have our other character walking around and jumping around, and we can do whatever we want while he's doing that. So while I was messing around, I thought this would be a really good way to, if you wanted to include like a ghosting character for like a tutorial to show players how to move around. So a little bit of extra work you could do is create a new material. I'm just gonna make it very basic. Throw a vector 3 in there. And change this to translucent. And a little bit of emissive, just so we can see it better. Cool. So now that we have that material, let's drag this out so we can. We have the wrong one open here. Okay, now that we have the character, we can grab the mesh, go to the content browser where we have that material and apply that to him. Give it a second to compile. There we go. And now we kind of have a translucent ghosting character that'll disappear after it performs the action. So that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about Take Recorder. Hoping you guys might be interested in just kind of playing around with this on your own time and finding how it works into your project, or maybe you just, keep it in the back of your head in case it does come up later. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was our new experimental modeling mode in Unreal, which is now available. Well, it was available in 4.25, but now we have a couple more features that I can talk about that I've been wanting to talk about in 4.26 preview too. So just like Take Recorder, this is going to be disabled by default. You'll need to go into plugins, and it'll be right here, modeling tools editor mode. And this particular feature I'm pretty familiar with because on the day-to-day job, I'm responsible for creating test coverage for this kind of stuff. So there are a lot of different tabs up here, but the general idea is to kind of cut out the middleman between you creating models and exporting them from Maya or 3ds Max or whatever DCC you're using, and just doing that straight in Unreal. So we have a number of ways where you can just create primitive stuff, boxes, you can create just meshes and stuff like that. There's a bunch of different settings over here, so you can change the dimensions and what materials they're using and how they use the UVs. But oops, well, we don't really need it. So the ones that I've been working on recently are the create tools. So we'll start with Polygon and just kind of move down, probably stopping around cut revolve. So Polygon is just as it sounds. It allows you to create a bunch of different types of polygons. By default, we're set to freehand, which means that we can kind of create the shape as we want. There's a bunch of different polygon types in here, so we can create circles if we want to, and that's how the brush will look. So if we want to, we can come in here and start drawing around, complete the shape, and then we can decide how tall we want that to be. And boom, there we go. We have a nice little L piece. You can create pretty much just about anything that you want with this thing. If you don't want to be extruding from the bottom up, you can rotate the draw plane so that you're now kind of extruding outwards. Whoops. Like that. If you don't want to extrude the mesh at all, you can create something like that and set this to flat mesh, which will just create a plane. Keep that there because we'll need that later. That's the basics of that. I mean, we could get into how all of these snap. You can snap the vertices to other meshes and whatnot, and in case you're trying to make sure that two meshes come out to be about the same height or same size on a particular face. The polypath tool is probably one of my favorites because you can create pretty complex stuff with this. The polypath allows you to create walls or paths, which can also be turned into ramps. So once you complete the shape, you have to extrude the width, and then you extrude the height. So now we have kind of like a narrow corridor instead of having to maybe, grab a bunch of cubes or whatever you may have downloaded from the marketplace and use that instead, and then adjusting the scale and then snapping them on. You can just draw it, and there you go. You can start using that in your player zoo, or you can use it to kind of get an idea of how you want your block out to look like. Now I mentioned ramps with polypath. I'll show you what that looks like. Output type, we want this to be a ramp. There we go, we'll do that. And then it just, instead of extruding the entire face, it just does it at an angle. And that's how you can create ramps. You can make them as complex as you want. So if you wanted kind of like a spiraling mountain. Now keep in mind, this is experimental, so it gets a little bit buggy when you do stuff like this. That looks pretty all right. There you go. And now you have your next Fall Guys level. And yeah, that's about all we can talk about for there. Polyrevolve is another interesting tool if you're trying to make kind of like set dressing assets. So if you wanted to make what this does is you create the spline on a draw plane, and then it rotates it around this purple line. So you complete the shape by just clicking the last vertice, and there you go, you have a little vase or a health potion. And then you can just accept that. It'll save it to the content browser somewhere, depending on what your settings are down here. And then you can kind of scale that down if it's a little bit too big for you. Some other things that you can do with Polyrevolve, let me see if I remember what the setting is. Profile is cross-section of plane, and we want to do this down to 3. So if you're trying to make columns, or maybe like square columns, instead of trying to do that real quick on Maya, you can actually do that here. You have to set profile is cross-section of plane, and you want to have steps down to like 2 or 3. And then you can start creating your column however you want. I'm just kind of freehand it here. Boom. There you go. We have a kind of triangle column, or if we want it to be traditional, we can do something like that. And then again, you can just kind of come in here and scale it up, and make it fit how it needs to. Okay. And then the last one here in the Create tool that I want to talk about is Cut Revolve. And in order to use Cut Revolve, you need to use a geometry that is just kind of a single face or a plane. Otherwise, it won't work. So what this does is it takes the plane and it uses that to rotate around this origin point and create a kind of a circular shape. And you can kind of edit how far you want it to rotate around. If you're making like an arched doorway or something like that, you can set it up like that. It's not too complex right now, but that's about the best we can get out of it. You can change how detailed you want the mesh to be. So if you want it to be very smooth, you'll increase steps. You don't want to increase this too much because it's calculating this on the go. So if you set it to a very high number and you don't have, you know, production quality computer with like 2 thread wrappers inside of it, it might crash the engine. Alrighty, and I think that's about all I wanted to talk about for the modeling tools. A lot of this stuff right now is placeholder. You know, we have some other tools where if you want to align some objects to each other, you can do that. You know, they're not exactly where you need them to be, or you know, you can't get to place them manually. You can use the align tool. You can also edit the pivot of selections or objects. Now this actually edits the pivot of the static mesh object, not just the instance of it within the scene. So be careful, you have to read this warning over here. We can edit the pivot over here and you can see that the pivot points for both of these things are now over here, which is useful in case you need to orbit them around something else. And I think that's about all I really wanted to talk about today. One other thing that doesn't really have to do with a creation pipeline is, I don't know if this is an issue that has been fixed yet. I haven't been able to see anything, but when I was working in an Unreal Engine at SCAD, we would do a lot of deleting and force deleting and stuff like that, which can kind of break references to other assets within the editor. And when it came time to the night before where we needed a build for Studio 2 or Studio 3, a lot of those broken references would cause the build to fail. What you can do to resolve that, instead of what I did, was exporting all of our assets to a brand new project and then updating all of the inputs, which took too much time. You can go into here to content, and there should be a fix up redirectors in folder. And that should do everything in there. Now we don't have anything, so it didn't do anything, but that should kind of straighten your project out a little bit more so that you don't hit those issues. Yeah, so I think now we can kind of move into the QA portion of this.
Okay. Well, so I mean, so we have a few more people. So guys, do you have any questions for Alex? Raise your hand. Maybe turn on your cameras or raise your hand for the little Zoom raise hand tool, and let me know. Ryan?
I'm just kind of curious, just in terms of the making the geometry, all of those different tools, how the UVs are typically handled with that. Like, I mean, do you typically use those tools to have something that you would actually put a texture on, or is that usually you would only use that for like boxing something out?
I think right now since you know where the tool is at, we're experimental. As far as I've seen, I haven't touched all of this yet. I've only touched probably about 50 to 60% of it as I'm working. But I haven't seen anything that'll allow you to kind of edit UVs. So if you're making a final asset, another DCC is probably your best bet. But if you need something to kind of get an idea of how it would look, or, you know, if you've got a very basic material, or if your art direction doesn't really require complex materials, you can probably use these as your final assets.
Wow, that's amazing.
Any other questions? Well, I do have one. Oh, no, go for it.
No, I was gonna just also ask, because so you're in quality assurance with Epic?
Yes.
So what does that exactly entail?
So I started out as a software tester, and my day-to-day would basically be my lead would put together a bunch of test passes that we needed to do. You know, as we were working on different development cycles, you know, 424, 425, 426. I think I came on towards the end of 424. And basically what I had to do was run these tests. You know, it's pretty much cut and dry what you have to do. It tells you exactly the steps you need to take. And then once you finally get to the end, it tells you what you should see. If you don't see something that is called out in the test, You kind of use your best judgment to determine whether or not maybe the test needs to be updated or if it's an actual issue. Typically, that would require going back to previous engine versions to see if that error was still occurring. If it's not, then it's probably a new issue.
Gotcha. Cool.
So I had a little bit of a question. Like I was obviously very, very interested about your recording tool, like the first tool that you showed us. So basically what you're recording is the positions and the animations of that character in the 3D space. I'm correct on this?
Yep. So you can do that for not just pawns, but anything that's moving around. You just have to tell it in the source to look at that and record that to the sequence.
So could that potentially, for example, are the physics that are attached to the character preserved?
Yes.
So the collision box, everything is preserved, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can go into that if you don't, like in the ghosting example, I decided not to really go over turning off the collision because I didn't feel like it, but you can go over and turn off that collision so that the player doesn't interact with it, or you can change how that collision works with other objects in the scene.
So, for example, if you had like, if you wanted to populate, let's say, a world, you know, with like animals that kind of do their stuff and that kind of behave without necessarily relying on the player decisions, like some sort of a very basic AI, you could basically use that tool to kind of like script that AI, have them kind of move around and do their stuff, etc., and use that in game. Could you do that?
Probably yes. I want to say that you could probably create some kind of loop in the level blueprint that kind of spawns those around randomly. And since they're not really interacting with a lot of stuff, they probably won't cause a lot of performance issues if you have like an open world type game.
And could you repurpose those animations, like string them up into like some sort of a state machine to actually create an AI that it may be making more decisions depending on where the player is, etc., etc.?
I think it does save them as an animation somewhere. I think this is it right here. So you can use that in a state machine. Yeah. And you know, you can go in here and edit it. So if you kind of just wanted part of it or you wanted to cut it up and move it around so that it's different every time, you could do that as well.
That's pretty badass. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
No guarantees, but based on what I see here, I'm pretty sure we can.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, we all understand that this is kind of like features that are kind of like just being deployed that are still experimental. But I think it's very exciting to see that potentially as a game designer, you can record behaviors and replay those behaviors in gameplay at runtime. I mean, I'm definitely jealous.
Yeah, I think Take Recorder, I don't think it's experimental right now, but I think Take Recorder was made with virtual production in mind, not necessarily game design. But you know, both of those kind of go back and forth, and so one tool created for the other really helps the other one out.
That's super, super cool. Anybody else? Come on, bring the questions. Don't be shy. No one has to turn your cameras on. Let's have a little bit of a Zoom party there. Jay, you have a question?
Yes, one of my questions was for the animation one too, is that can it work for multiple meshes at once, or is it just stuck to that one mesh?
What do you mean? Are you asking if you can record several different things?
Yeah.
At the same time? So yeah, we can have multiple, if we go back into the Take Recorder, we can have multiple different sources in here that it's going to record, and you can pretty much record anything.
Okay.
So the UI is a little bit weird. I don't know why this is here. I think we have a plugin for that right now, but it creates an entire list, and you can kind of turn them on and off as you want to record them. So if you want to kind of create your set of what you want to record, and then kind of record them one at a time, you can do that.
Are there any distinct limitations that you're aware of as far as like the amount of time you can record or the amount of objects that can be recorded at one time, like before it starts taking hits of some sort?
My gut answer is that probably depends on your computer.
That's fair. Yeah, okay. But as far as you're aware though, it's fairly like you can do a pretty hefty recording, even like, I mean, I'm running, you know, a Gamers Republic laptop, but just on your setup, for instance. Like,
I haven't done like a lot of stress testing with Take Recorder. This is actually a tool that I've only kind of briefly touched while I was testing. I'm
Gotcha.
much more familiar with other tools such as like the DCC stuff that we've been working on.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anybody else?
Very excited for the
Alexander?
possibilities of-
Yeah, actually, I'm not really sure if this would be even viable at all, but I'm wondering whether or not you could actually record in some sort of multiplayer or server-based environment, because I could totally see some really cool applications with that.
I don't know anything about it, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we have something called multi-user, which allows you to have more than one person connect to a Unreal instance on the same network and work on the same level at the same time. You might be able to do something that way. I don't know how it works with Take Recorder, because both of those things I've only kind of worked briefly and I don't have a very in-depth knowledge base about, but look it up online. If you really want to give that a shot, and if it's relevant to the project that you're working on, I encourage you to check it out.
No, yeah, I could just totally see some really cool applications with it. I mean, this is already a really great feature in the first place. I mean, Gishard brought up some really interesting points with it, and I think kind of thinking about like further dynamics with that, or you know, taking kind of like what was being discussed, taking it into a game design perspective instead would be I don't know, really cool, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I trust that you guys will find some really interesting ways to include this into something in the future.
And then going back to your modelization tools, so when you did work on a Dogged Hungry, you guys had a pretty serious, pretty well done block-out. Were you using in-engine tools, or were you using kind of like external tools?
I wasn't involved in that process at all, but as far as I know, they used kind of content set that somebody else had created that was specifically for blocking out. So it had those materials that kind of showed you how big they were and everything. When it came down to the final product, I think those assets were so integrated into the project at that point that trying to get rid of them so that our project, the final build, wasn't so big, was causing so many errors that we just had to end up keeping them in at the end.
So is there a pipeline for those kind of gray boxing assets that you're creating with that particular tool? I don't remember the name of it. Does it have a name?
Sorry?
The name of that gray boxing tool that you just showed us, you know, where you can extrude and create shapes.
Yeah, we're calling them the modeling mode modeling tools.
Okay.
You know?
So is there, like, for example, a pipeline where like you're going to get a cube and that cube is going to be an actor, I assume, correct?
Yeah.
Is there a pipeline? So for example, to say, hey, that actor number 725, I want to replace it with that mesh and it's going to swap them? Or is that something that you need to do by hand? How does that work? Like, do you have an automation of like basically kind of like upgrading gray boxing assets into kind of like final arted assets? Or is it something that you need to do by hand and like replace them so that they are still kind of linked and referenced correctly in your engine?
I don't think there's a very eloquent way of doing that right now. I know that if you have an asset saved in a level or referenced by a level, you know, like we do here, if you go and try and delete it, I'm pretty sure it'll bring up the force delete thing, and you can replace it with a different reference if you want.
Gotcha. That shows, I'm sure my question shows how much I don't know about Unreal Engine.
As far as taking that asset, turning it into something better, and then replacing it, I think that kind of depends on the future of this tool. And so that's kind of an unknown answer right now.
Okay, so which kind of leads to my next question. Can these be exported as like some sort of FBX or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything that's already a static mesh asset in Unreal, I'm pretty sure you can export. So that's already gone. So to go back to Ryan's question, potentially, even though they may not necessarily have the UV done at an engine level, what you could do is export the asset, unpack the UVs into your favorite thing, and then bring them back, and that should be seamless. Yeah, I forget. I think it's under asset actions. Yeah, here we go. Export right here. And then you can save that as an FBX and then bring it into Maya if you like. And I just realized as I was kind of looking for that, you can actually, where did it go? Well, there's an option here to replace this asset with another one. Oh, here it is. It was just looking different. So you can just do this.
Awesome.
Boom. And it automatically kind of like, if you have something selected in the content browser, it'll look at that one first. So you can just do that real fast.
And can you group them and export them as a group?
Yeah. So I don't know if you can group them within the content browser. I think something you would rather do right now is kind of get the group that you want and then use the merge actors tool and merge them together. We can save that in the content browser and then we can export it.
So this is absolutely wonderful because
So
you
now
could
this
potentially.
oops, sorry. This is now one thing.
Yeah, that means that basically you can actually gray box an entire level and then export it in Maya and basically kind of like dress it in Maya with the real geometry and things like that and re-import it into Unreal and swap it with the final geometry in a blink of an eye with very, very little overhead. So
yeah,
super exciting.
That'll probably also help so that you have to worry about scaling or importing Juliet or whatever her name was into Maya to make sure you have the right proportions.
Yep. I can definitely see that helping tons. Any more questions, guys? Come on, don't be shy. He was a student like you last year.
Was it last year?
No? Yeah, Alex?
Yeah, it was.
Sorry, my mic wouldn't unmute. I don't know. I don't know if this is like too personal. Do you work remotely with Epic, or do you actually work in, what is it, North Carolina? I think it is, or something.
Oh
like
no,
that?
I'm in Cary, North Carolina right now.
Okay, yeah, I was
right
wondering
now,
like what their setup is.
Yeah, right now we are work from home. I was working in an office at one point, and then pandemic happened. Don't know if I'm excited to go back to the office or if I like being able to roll out of bed at 8:55 and then start working, but you know, there's a give and take to everything, I guess.
Everybody in Epic is remote now?
Yes. We have people going to the office to resolve IT issues every now and then, but it's pretty much a ghost town in the building.
How much, and that may be a question that you cannot answer, but how much at the QA level, how much of the Epic owned IPs like Fortnite, for example, how much of these contribute to new features in the engine? Meaning like the fact that they have their own games that have like kind of test cases of like things that the players want to do, etc. Does that influence or not at all the way Unreal is being built?
Don't know how in depth I can go into that, but I know I can say yes.
Okay. That's good enough for me.
So yeah, our larger projects will definitely be at least a driving force of how the engine evolves.
Okay.
Because we need to be able to kind of get better tools or fix things that our content creators are having issues with.
Yeah, I would assume that they would use those kind of live operations as kind of like a learning cases to make the tool kind of like more flexible. So, okay. Well, guys, it's last call for last question. So if you have something burning your tongue, get it out. No, nothing. Okay, well, listen, that was William. Thank you so much for
no problem.
coming and showing us this. William is also on Discord, so if you want to kind of like thank him or whatever, you can.
Yeah,
you can
just
do
say
so
Alex Berryhill because that's how I go by. It just says William because that's the name it pulled from my Gmail account. Okay,
so Alex William Berryhill. How about that? We are going to give you titles of nobility. So anyway, thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it. We are having another one of those talks next week. It will be Monica and Christine, and Alex actually worked with Christine because she also comes from the Dogon Andre team, and they will be talking about kind of like remote working and working, finding their first job. Like, I mean, basically like everything that kind of a SCAD student goes through when they graduate and when they kind of like find that dream job. And they will most likely have little tips and tricks for us on how to kind of like organize oneself in order to kind of like be able to work with a team even remotely. Thank you guys, thank you everybody for coming. Have a great weekend. I know that you're all pretty busy on next week's delivery, so I'll be checking Discord every now and then in case you have any questions. In the meantime, like keep your head down, do some great work, and I'm looking forward to see what you have for me next week. Okay.
Bye.
And Alex,
Thank you
again,
very much.
Thanks, guys.
a round of applause for Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome
you.
stuff.
Goodbye, everybody.
All right. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
See you again.
Yeah.
Take it
Thank you
easy.
so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Goodbye.